So, hi everyone, I'm Maya Bloomberg, hematology nurse practitioner specializing in sickle cell for well over a decade now. I am the founder and president of the Heme Foundation and someone who's just very deeply committed to making sure that no one has to walk this journey of life alone. Today's webinar, Thriving Through Connection, it's rooted in the lived experiences of those impacted with sickle cell and chronic stress, whether you're a patient, provider, or an advocate. We know that pain isn't just physical. Isolation, misunderstood experiences, emotional burnout, these all can take a toll. But when we come together, something powerful truly happens. So the goal today is really to create a space that's informative, that's uplifting, it's real, a space where we can talk about mental health without any stigma, explore how relationships help us heal, find joy, and not just overcome trauma, but in moments of connection that carry us forward. Now, a little bit about the nonprofit Heme Foundation. Heme Foundation Health Equity Matters is what it stands for, and we are not just focused on care, we're focused on connection, healing, and purpose. This nonprofit idea was birthed after my personal self-healing journey. I had twins born in January 2020, and then I went into lockdown in March 2020 with 3 kids under the age of 2, and it highlighted mental health issues for everyone. But that being said, therapy was a complete godsend, and it brought such an awareness and empowerment and transformation in my life. And I wanted to bring the same for my patients and other warriors, just understanding how interconnected our mental health and physical health are. Now, our work addresses the root causes of disparities by offering programs that uplift mental, emotional, and educational well-being. And we believe that wellness includes the entire person, and everyone deserves access to care that honors their story. Here's a snapshot of the work we are doing. So on the left-hand side is Thrive. This is our flagship retreat that brings education on mental health and wellness, complemented with healing modalities like yoga and sound bath meditation. We're having it again this year in November. This was our first year awarding scholarships with the understanding that education improves health outcomes. We had 29 applicants, and after a lot of deliberation, we ended up awarding 6 scholarships in total, 3 per category. We were only going to do 1 in each category, but we just had such a hard time sorting through and choosing winners. So we were luckily able to get donations to be able to award additional scholarships this year. This year, we also partnered with the oldest large and precious metal distributor in the world to make an official World Sickle Cell Day coin. We had a coin design contest, and winners were selected by popular vote. And I'm still amazed. We had over 489 votes placed. Sales will be going live soon. It was supposed to be yesterday on World Sickle Cell Day, and I am upset with myself, but I have to accept my bandwidth has just been extremely stretched over these few weeks, and we cannot rush perfection, but there is a sneak peek of what it'll look like, and it's really powerful. I'm very excited about the outcome. Lastly, I have to acknowledge June 19th because it holds such a powerful meaning, celebrating both World Sickle Cell Day and Juneteenth. The convergence of these 2 days is definitely more than just a coincidence. When we talk about sickle cell is a biologically based disease. It's largely underfunded, and it's lacked prioritization for decades, and it suggests that racism is an underlying reason for this disparity. Sickle cell warriors' experiences of being judged, unheard, and mistreated by the healthcare system parallel the historical silencing and marginalization of African Americans. Yet, amidst all of these challenges, there is that shared story of resilience, advocacy, and hope. So by recognizing the shared history and the ongoing challenges, I truly believe we can foster a deeper understanding and a more inclusive approach to both social justice and healthcare. I also want to encourage everyone to visit my Instagram or this post specifically because there's a free guide there to help you on your healing journey. We have countless studies that confirm that trauma and fear responses can be passed down from our ancestors, and it shapes how we respond to stress, fear, and pain. But just as we can inherit these patterns, we can interrupt and rewrite them, and that's where the true healing begins. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Now, here is how today's webinar is going to flow. We're going to start with just a high-level overview of mental health and sickle cell and how it shows up emotionally and physically. Our panel will then discuss practical tips and strategies for managing stress, maintaining mental well-being. We'll then move on to discussing the importance of building strong relationships and community when it comes to combating isolation. And then lastly, we're going to end with finding joy behind trauma and how it can be a healing force. So I really do want to encourage everyone to use the chat, write if something resonates. We'll have time to take some questions from the audience at the end as well. But to start with a little icebreaker, I want everyone to use the chat and just use one word, two if you're having a hard time, but describe a word that describes how you're feeling today. So place it in the chat, and just while we're waiting for some responses, I'm going to say that my word, what's my word? I'm just relieved. It's been a long few weeks. We have a lot of moving parts. June is obviously a very hot month for sickle cell. We have a World Sickle Cell Day event tomorrow for anybody who's in South Florida or Miami. Definitely come to that. So many nonprofit moving parts between this webinar, the scholarships, the coin design contest, actively building a sickle cell program, a lot of moving parts. So very happy that this week comes to an end. And I just realized I did not introduce my panel. So back one slide, below you can see 4 beautiful ladies who are accompanying me to help have this conversation today. All of them are sickle cell warriors who I have been very fortunate to have a personal relationship with them as well. Devin Barr, she's actually one of my board members on the nonprofit. She has sickle beta thalassemia 0. She's a warrior, she's a mom, she's a really fierce advocate. We then have Doris, who has hemoglobin SC. She is another very strong advocate and warrior mom. Megan Livesey has hemoglobin SS. She's also a social worker as well. If anybody was at Thrive, all 4 of these attendees were there as well. And Vicky Quintana, she has hemoglobin SS. She is a social worker. She is the newest member of our sickle cell team at University of Miami, and she helps with case management and care coordination. So I'm seeing some of the responses. I see hopeful, sluggish. I can relate to that one too. Faithful, enthusiastic. Thank you, everyone. All right, so time to dive into mental health and sickle cell. And as a provider, I've seen firsthand how the emotional weight of sickle cell goes unspoken. And this is really not even for sickle cell, just based on our hustle culture in life. People are expected to just push through, but trauma, fatigue, anxiety, and isolation are real and they matter. And today we're going to name that. We're going to explore ways to support ourselves and each other so no one feels invisible. And more importantly, we all feel empowered to navigate life. The presentation is just going to start with a little sickle cell 101, the psychological impact of the condition, and then we'll explore how trauma shows up not just as an isolated event, but as ongoing experiences that are shaped by our environments, our bodies, and even the healthcare system we interact with. And then afterwards, I will invite the panel up to share their experiences, tips for navigating life, and just talk about why the sense of community and connection isn't just helpful, but healing. So sickle cell is the most common inherited disorder, blood disorder, that primarily affects Black and Brown individuals, just given that association with malaria. However, it can affect any race or ethnicity. It's caused by a single point gene mutation on the beta globin gene. Like literally just that one single point is what causes a person to produce abnormal hemoglobin. Now your hemoglobin are what make up your red blood cells. Normally our red blood cells, they're smooth, they're round, they get through the blood vessel with ease. However, individuals with sickle cell, under certain triggers or certain factors, that hemoglobin can turn into a crescent or a sickled shape. It becomes long, rigid, sticky, and when these cells stick together, it blocks off blood flow, which then blocks oxygen delivery, which is the food and nutrients that our body needs, which is when you get that first warning sign of pain. Now, the lifespan of a red blood cell is usually 120 days, where a sickled red blood cell is only 10 to 20 days, so we also see the resultant anemia. This slide highlights the acute and long-term complications that can be seen in sickle cell. Now, the purpose of this presentation, again, is really more on the mental health and psychological impact of it, but I just wanted to emphasize how sickle cell is so much more than just pain and anemia. There's that huge psychological burden living with sickle cell, both because the disease itself and all of the physical symptoms and complications we just saw, but also from the stigmatization from others, whether it's healthcare providers, friends, or even family members. Patients often aren't believed when they seek medical attention, and they're commonly mislabeled as drug seekers, and pain is doubted. And because of this, the majority will avoid hospitalizations at all costs. We have a study that found that 60% of sickle cell warriors delayed emergency room care to avoid the judgment and mistreatment. And when they finally do seek medical attention, they're oftentimes met with resistance by doubting providers, essentially having to prove that the pain is severe enough and deserving of pain medication, which just creates this vicious cycle worsening the pain and the suffering, and could lead to medical trauma. Pain crises and ER visits might result in missed school or work and other activities, and this can be extremely isolating for the individual and the entire family. I am more of an adult provider, but I love listening to pediatrics and just getting a more well-rounded assessment of it. And I listened to this 15-year-old warrior speak about how isolating it is when missing school and just coming back and feeling so out of the loop, especially if you don't have that strong friend group who want to make sure to keep you up to date. So you can imagine depression and anxiety are common. We have rates reported around 35% of individuals have it, and it's probably underreported. And data also confirms that individuals with sickle cell with depression or anxiety have more days in pain, more severe pain, and more hospitalizations as well. So I want to touch a little on medical trauma and PTSD because I don't think that everybody is familiar with it, and you might check off some of these boxes. And again, once you have the awareness and insight is when you can actually start to intervene and transform your life. So medical trauma is an emotional and physical response to medical care triggering a trauma response. This is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Maybe this is anger, or you get easily agitated, or you fight or curse out with the staff, or you're just not trusting of your medical staff. Now, medical PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder is a psychological condition that can develop in individuals who have experienced a traumatic medical event or procedure and cause all of those symptoms below. And it's really important to just, if you check these boxes off, to seek professional help if you or if you know somebody who is experiencing these symptoms, because there are treatment and support available to manage and cope with medical PTSD. Highlighted here are different ways or different causes of medical trauma and PTSD and sickle cell. This could be from pain not being believed or being gaslit by medical providers, but it's truly applicable for so many individuals beyond just a sickle cell diagnosis. Maybe after receiving a difficult diagnosis or a delay in diagnosis, frequent hospitalizations and treatments, not having appropriate support at home. These experiences essentially create this inner narrative, and it leads to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. Maybe it leads to having a low self-esteem or low sense of self-worth. Maybe you feel like a burden, isolated, or alone. And if you don't have the awareness or the insight where these feelings and limiting beliefs are rooted in, it could prevent someone from actually seeking the support they need. Or it might even prevent them from seeking any medical attention, which could lead to complications that might have been preventable. And overall, it can lead to a more challenging life where you're just constantly being triggered and operating out of a survival, fight, or flight mode. Sickle cell not only affects the patient, but it has a significant psychological impact on caregivers and really the entire family. The unpredictability of crises also impacts caregivers. It might affect their ability to pursue certain careers or their dreams. There's a lot of guilt passing on a condition to a child. We have studies that show only 16% of women of childbearing age are aware of their trait status. And when it comes to that, if that's that statistic, there's all of these individuals who are finding out of their carrier status when they have their child diagnosed with sickle cell, when we could have been a little bit more proactive by knowing your carrier status. There's also a lot of guilt and negative feelings when you feel like you can't help your child when they're in pain. So depression and anxiety is also common in this population. There's a huge financial strain, whether it's with the medications or transportation. I have the Transformers poster on the right-hand side because that movie highlighted a brother having sickle cell. That was the main reason the main character stole the car in the first place, to help get money for his brother's treatment, which ultimately was the Transformer. So it's important to understand the various challenges that are faced by the entire family and the importance of support networks in managing the psychological well-being of everyone involved. Some quick stats, you can see 40 to 70% of caregivers have depression type symptoms, and the highest risk are caregivers who are working full-time, and those under the age of 45 are having the biggest impact on emotional and physical health. So I don't know who all is in the audience right now, if you're sickle cell warriors, if you have a loved one, you're a caregiver, but it's so important for all of us to address our mental health, because if we're not healthy ourselves, how are we going to be able to show up for the ones that we love? So we really need to have this dialogue with everyone, warriors, caregivers, even providers, because provider burnout 100% is a thing too. So I want to pause here. This is the second portion of this talk where we're going to focus on trauma. And it's important, and I kind of want to introduce it with a simple truth in that trauma isn't just what happened. It's what's still happening inside you. whether it's the tension in your chest, the way your breath shortens without any warning, the way your body braces even when there's no danger around you. For many living with sickle cell, chronic stress and medical trauma, they're not just events, these are ongoing imprints. And it's the story that the nervous system keeps repeating until it finally feels safe enough to release it. There are so many lists talking about the different types of trauma, but I like this one because it kind of shows the multiple levels, both direct and indirect, and how they can interplay together. So you have your big trauma or big T. These have significant or major traumatic events that have a profound impact on an individual's life. So this could be a serious accident, natural disaster, robbery, even just witnessing a natural disaster could be that big trauma. Little t might be a little less severe or impactful, but it still causes some distress or discomfort. So maybe you're having legal troubles or just interpersonal conflict or moving. Chronic occurs repeatedly or over an extended period of time, and it has this cumulative effect on a person's well-being. This could be ongoing abuse, violence, or just ongoing exposure to distressing environments. Could be homelessness or being bullied or picked on as a child or even a refugee. Complex trauma is similar to chronic in that it involves multiple traumatic events like abuse, neglect, or violence, but it could also be having an overly strict upbringing or coercion or betrayal of a parent, a long-term misdiagnosis of health issues. We have historical trauma, which just leaves that lasting emotional and psychological impact that would be experienced by a particular group. And then that's then being passed down to future generations through storytelling, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And again, we have science shows that these traumas are passed down to future generations. This is called epigenetics. And once you have the awareness of what your patterns are, you can realize that you're carrying probably a lot of weight and a lot of heaviness that is not yours to carry. And then lastly, we have vicarious trauma, which is secondary or indirect trauma. And this could be something just watching the news. Like the current state of our world right now is really traumatic. And I have to set boundaries on the news that I'm watching, on what I'm seeing on social media, because I feel it in my body, and I meditate a lot, and I meditate on our earth, and we'll see what's going on with that. Now, how a child's brain develops, particularly in the first 5 years of life, determines how they see and respond to the world. We form our own self-limiting beliefs based on our lived experiences. And as kids, we essentially just create these stories in our head for why certain things happen because we don't have the adult insight to understand certain things. And we develop these defense mechanisms to help us keep us safe. But the reality is these defense mechanisms don't serve us once we become adults, but a lot of us don't have the awareness, and we're continuing with these same patterns, which are just knee-jerk reactions. Infants and toddlers, we know that they require a supportive and nurturing parent and caregiver to feel safe and secure and to thrive. And humans have varying capacities to parent. And again, this isn't to shame anybody. We are all doing our best. And it's important to realize that we do our best with the resources that we're given. And we think about our parents, our grandparents, how were they raised? And a lot of times we are continuing similar patterns. But again, you can be that cycle breaker once you have that. So everything I'm saying is not shame-based. It's just to help bring awareness and see what more we can be doing. So when it comes to humans' different capacities to parent, some might lack the support of family or friends, or maybe they're living in unstable conditions or struggling financially, maybe fighting addiction or confronting other significant challenges. And as a result, we have children who are growing up in environments ranging from safe, stable, and nurturing to abusive, chaotic, and neglectful. So when we looked at this graph on the left-hand side, it really shows those immediate and lasting significance of early childhood experiences. It affects the type of relationships we form, how we respond to things, our behaviors, our internal sense of self, and most importantly, our physical health. So how does trauma show up? And I think the most common is in our relationships. We attract what is most comfortable to us. So say you grew up in a chaotic environment, you might find yourself drawn to chaotic relationships. Maybe you had daddy issues or abandonment issues, so you end up getting into relationships where you're getting the bare minimum. But since that's what you're used to, you've actually accepted it. So this is why self-healing is so important before getting into committed relationships. Otherwise, you're really trauma bonding and just attracting someone based on potentially toxic attributes. Intimacy is something that can be affected as well, or even physical touch. This is especially true for abuse survivors or those with low sense of self-worth. Maybe you were constantly criticized growing up. the need for perfection. This is speaking from personal experience, where we want to control things, whether it is over explaining to control a person's perception of who I am or trying to micromanage group projects, since losing control is a very big trigger for me, but I have the awareness and I can feel it in my body before I get to the point of that knee-jerk reaction. Maybe you grew up in a household where your needs weren't met, or maybe you felt like you're constantly walking on eggshells, not knowing how a parent's going to act. You might actually now find it difficult to communicate or express your needs, or it might be impossible for you to set boundaries because you don't want to avoid disappointment, because in your mind, if you get somebody upset, rejection is not safe. And our body, our ego thrives to do whatever we can to keep us feeling safe. So you can see how all of this together without the proper processing can then lead to brain fog, among other issues. So what happens when you're triggered? Here are the 4 types of trauma responses, and I'm curious where you all fall. So fight, this is your more aggressive and angry when triggered. So this is going to be your patient who curses or screams at the medical staff when their pain's doubted, or when the ER doctor decides that they're just going to order your home oral medications that have already failed you at home. Like, you get really angry, you are a fight trauma response. Flight is the more avoidant type, anxious or fearful. Freeze is the stuck and dissociate. This is very common for people who survive in sexual abuse and felt powerless. Fawn, this is my personal vice. This is the only one that's actually learned. It's not an automatic knee-jerk response. And for a while, I thought this was just my personality trait. But through therapy, I realized that these were learned behaviors that I learned very early on, because it is what kept me safe as a child. It's what kept me feeling accepted, approved. And again, once you realize that these are learned behaviors in response to various traumas compounding throughout my life, I was able to intervene and change that. So now let's talk about what happens physiologically when we are triggered. And I'm going to use Dan Siegel's hands-brain model. So you have your wrist, which is what is your brainstem. This is what's responsible for your basic functions like breathing, heart rate. It helps us stay alive without even having to think about it. We then have the palm of our hand, which is the limbic system. This is involved with your emotions, your memories, and helps us just feel and remember things. Our fingers up here are our prefrontal cortex. This is the front part of the brain. This is really what differentiates us from animals, and it's our thinking brain needed to decision make, problem solve. It helps us plan, make choices, and control our emotions. And lastly, we have our thumb, which represents the amygdala, which is the feeling part of our brain, and it tucks together, connecting the brainstem, limbic system, and prefrontal cortex. So when we are triggered, prefrontal cortex, these 4 fingers, they go out the door. This is why decision making and thinking rationally is more difficult, because we're literally just operating in survival mode. We're going into those fight or flight responses. So we need to re-engage these fingers so we can start thinking rationally again. However, the only way that we're going to re-engage these fingers is if you have the awareness. So for me, once I realized what the physiologic reason was for a lot of my reactions, it gave me the awareness that I needed to make it easier to intervene. And spoiler alert, just taking an intentional deep breath or even humming can help re-engage these fingers. Like, healing is so much easier than people like to think. We have so many free tools literally at our disposal that we can just start to incorporate in our day. So again, once awareness is there is when the true transformation can happen. So below is kind of just a high-level overview addressing our mental health, whether you have sickle cell, stress negatively impacts everything. So I love when people say just stress less, but you want to identify what are your stressors, learn how to ask for help. No is a full sentence, no period. Other important things are just prioritizing self-care and seeking support, whether from families, friends, community-based organizations, or professional. I did see a few members from ASAP, Advancing Sickle Cell Advocacy Project, on the call. So thank you so much for supporting. It's a wonderful CBO in South Florida in the Broward area, if you're there. So I'm going to stop here and just bring my panel up so we can really hone in on the strategies to navigating sickle cell, so we can make sure we're not just surviving, but thriving. Let me get my screens up and get my panelists up as well. Thank you so much, Vicki. Perfect. So I want to start with a question for all of my panelists. And this is, what is one thing that you wish more people understood about the mental health challenges that come with sickle cell? Vicki, I'm going to have you go first. I'm kind of just going along a line with how I see you all on my screen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I think one thing that I wish more people would understand is that being strong all the time isn't a choice. It's a survival mechanism and it's exhausting. People often admire those living with sickle cell for their strength, resilience, and just pushing through the pain. And while that praise may be well intentioned, it can unintentionally create pressure to hide vulnerability, emotional fatigue, and mental health struggles. I think we warriors often downplay our pain to avoid expressing emotional distress because we fear being judged and misunderstood and feel like we have to smile through the suffering to keep jobs, relationships, or social status. But this silent strength can come at a cost. We bottle up our feelings, we're not seeking help, we're internalizing our trauma. But the truth is, we warriors deserve a space to break down, to rest, to say, I'm not okay today without the guilt or stigma. Mental wellness for me doesn't mean always being positive. It means being real. And warriors need safe, compassionate spaces like this one where we can connect and be both strong and soft because both are part of the fight.
Chills from that. And I think that what you say resonates
Yeah.
so much. I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think a lot of times people don't want to be as strong. They need to be. And it's our strong friends that we need to check in most. And I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes people think they're strong and they're just getting by. Devin, I would love to hear your response as well. What do you wish more people understood about the mental health
Yeah,
challenges?
so hi everyone. Life on its own can just be so mentally challenging. But if I had to hone in on one thing, I wish people understood that the heavy mental load of a chronic illness just doesn't get easier with time. Um, as I get older, I feel the buildup of all the suffering I've endured. And although I gain a little strength with each hardship I overcome, the weight of each experience just never goes away. Um, and people can't see the heavy mental baggage I'm lugging around on the daily, and I really wish they could.
Yeah, I recommend we're going to be sending resources to everybody after, and I really encourage everybody to listen to a video I'm going to send of Devin's story because everyone up here, it just confirms you really can't judge a book by its cover. Because if you knew all of Devin's medical history and complications and surgical history, etc., you would just be jaw to the floor and seeing such a beautiful warrior and navigating life seemingly with ease, but another super strong warrior who I'm sure it would be nice not having to be as strong all of the time. Doris, what about you?
I think that one of the things that I wish people understood from a mom's perspective from having sickle cell disease is how much we have to uh, fake it. And that is not always a good thing, right? Because when you fake it, you're putting off like if you're this strong warrior, which I love that they call us that. But I'm trying to how would I say it? Como decompress from that name or that label, just because sometimes my family and friends, because we're always in the hospital, it's like, oh, you'll be fine, you're gonna get out soon. And that hasn't been the case for a lot of my friends. So I just wish they'd understand that, even though it may seem like a simple leg crisis, I mean, they get leg crisis, arm crisis, and I'm in the hospital, it can lead to, other more difficult organ complications and things like that. So I just wish they'd understand that us advocating for ourselves in a hospital setting is not just us wanting to share information, is really trying to get proper care.
That's so true. And I think it's hard for people who don't have a full awareness of sickle cell to understand what it entails. There really is that whole unpredictable piece, and it takes one crisis to contribute to that premature mortality. But I try not to focus on that because there's so many things that are out of our control. And if we ruminate on that aspect, and it's going to negatively impact our mental health. So I feel like they are likely saying that to just help you recover. And they think they're giving you that positive, you're going to do this, you do it all of the time. But at the same time, I can imagine and empathize what that feels like regularly and just knowing what other warriors have experienced, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Megan, what about you?
Hi. Yes, I wish more people understood how scary, lonely, and anxiety-provoking a sickle cell crisis can feel, in that moment, amongst, living with a chronic illness. But, I think it's common for warriors to feel shame and guilt and related to their diagnosis and refrain from seeking help from family, or friends due to feeling burdensome or just having, different needs. And so, I think, similar to kind of what Devan said, it doesn't get better. It's not something that gets better with time. I think that mental health and sickle cell requires an ongoing commitment to your self-care, to connecting community, and just to education as well.
I think that's great. Thank you. And I'm going to put you on the spot again, Megan. So last year at my Thrive event, Megan had done a presentation on mindfulness. So I'm curious, as a warrior, take your social work hat on and put your warrior hat on now. When you're going through a tough time, what do you find, or what's something that really helps you stay grounded or find relief, whether it's a practice, a mindset, or just seeking support?
Yeah, I mean, it took me many years to understand this, and understand the correlation between controlling my breath and being in the midst of a sickle cell crisis. And so, techniques that I found helpful is deep breathing exercises, using ambient sounds, meditation, because I think, you tend to, in a crisis, you're tensing up, you're wanting to hold on, and that can sometimes intensify the crisis and the pain that you feel. So these are techniques that I, continue to use and find, helpful. Not that it's going to resolve the pain, but makes it a little bit, easier to kind of, endure. And even outside of experiencing crisis, I think I find these techniques also helpful in just kind of managing, day-to-day work, and life stressors.
I totally agree. I mean, grounding is my jam with everything in life. So it's very helpful when you're stressed and having a sickle cell crisis. But these are skills that, again, that's why I said this is for warriors, but at the same time, it's caregivers, providers, everybody is going to benefit from these type of skills. And my personal favorite grounding technique is going outside barefoot and sitting in the ground. And I think I probably recommended it to everybody on this panel. So I'm sorry if your family members are like, what the hell are you doing outside barefoot? But it really connects you and your frequency with the earth. So if I do a lot of frequency-based experiments and research, and a different interest that I'm co-authoring a paper on the effects of frequency and music on the effects of our whole blood. And it's the whole concept that everything in this universe, every cell in our body, every organ operates a certain frequency. And when that frequency is off is when we can have illness or symptoms. So when we think about a radio, we tune into the radio frequency, it's clear. But if you're off by a little bit, that's when we get some static. And that static is the illness, the crisis, a mental health breakdown, etc. So when we are using going outside and doing grounding and earthing, we're essentially reconnecting ourselves with the earth frequency to help us get back into a coherent state. And a coherent state is when your mind and body is back in sync and back in rhythm. And that is more conductive for healing and helps with clarity and just navigating life with ease. So I totally encourage everyone to incorporate some grounding exercises. I can make a meditation video for a little visualization exercise if people think that'd be easy. Doris, I want to get you to chime in because Doris and I have connected a lot on our holistic aspects of things. We do weird theta wave sessions and the egg. And
that's how we connected on Instagram.
I know, I love it.
Visually,
do weird stuff,
initially.
Guys, I'm all about
but
complimenting. Yeah.
No, everything you guys are saying, I practice, and some more than others, but I've learned to have non-negotiables for myself on a daily basis. And I think for me, one of the things that I'm currently so intrigued by is just sound therapy and the way that sound waves can influence. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that, by you hitting a gong, that it's going to take away your leg pain instantly, but what I will say is creating a ritual for myself, especially at bedtime. I tried to do it in the morning, during school routines, but it's not working. So for me, it's more at nighttime where before I take my bedtime medications, whether it's just the regular meds or extra, pain meds, I roll out my infrared light therapy mat, on my bed where I can just, once it's done, I could just roll over to the other side where the mat's not there if I'm in too much pain. Essential oils, I'll rub them. I have my infuser. I detox a lot with rosemary essential oil. And what's the other one? Oregano oil. That's like oregano oil. It's like an antibiotic. So I use that a lot. What's another thing that I can say? Oh, so let's say I'll walk you through my nighttime ritual. I'll roll out my red infrared light mat on my bed. I'll put on some headphones and I'll listen to binaural beats, right? For me, the music that's going in, it doesn't have any words. It's not like a meditation walkthrough type of, music. But if I'm having a lot of pain in my legs and they're throbbing, the music that I'm listening to, I'll usually try to match the what I'm feeling in that moment. And it's almost like having a symphony. I know it sounds insane, but almost like a symphony of pain through my body, but the music somehow makes it feel like, okay, this pain has purpose. I'm music right now. But things like that. So yeah.
I know I'm thinking we need to do a separate post just on, or a separate webinar on all the holistic aspects, because there's so many things that I want to say between turmeric and Epsom salt and so many modalities, but I really want to pivot a little bit and now focus a little bit more on building strong relationships. Devin, I'm going to throw this one on you just to get a little mom and wife perspective, but I'm curious, how has sickle cell impacted your relationships, whether family, friends, or as a wife?
Yeah, so for me, having a chronic illness has really given me a heightened level of clarity about who belongs. It comes with the ability to kind of easily weed out who deserves a space in your life. It has made me extremely selective about choosing people around who exude like the wrong type of energy. So my husband in particular, we've been together for 22 years, so he thinks he's a sickle cell expert now. But I remember when I first divulged that I had sickle cell to him, he asked tons of questions. And on his own accord, he went and did an immense amount of research to be able to better understand what life was like for me. I recognized pretty quickly that this intense interest to actually comprehend my world would ultimately translate into an unconditional type of support that I had previously only experienced like with my parents. This stood out to me, because I have I have some very close blood relatives who barely ever asked me a single question about any of the intricacies of my illness. And now, like my son, who's only 8, now reinforces that when someone really cares and belongs in your life, they'll do what it takes to understand you. Because as he now asks me to explain what's happening in my body when he sees that I'm down. So he's a constant reminder for me that I really need to step back and find the time to make sure that my mind and body are well. I I recognized that I was literally running myself into the ground trying to be super mom because I feel so guilty about the days that I could barely do any of my motherly duties. But I've just recently come to the realization that I couldn't be the super mom I aim to be if I was neglecting myself. Uh, so I think for these two major relationships in my life, my husband and my son, I need to invest in making sure that I'm okay so that I can continue to show up as the most whole, happier, healthier version of myself to be able to do all the things I love with the people I love.
I absolutely love that. I 100% agree with protecting your energy. I think you made an important point for our kids. Like my mom had depression, she still has it. And as a child, I never understood why is my mom so fun in front of my friends, but when she goes home, she just goes upstairs. And I created a narrative like, what did I do wrong? So I think as warrior moms, it's extremely important to be transparent about the struggles you're going through because otherwise, as kids, we just create these narratives to justify what is happening. And I think you've really set an example for that. And also, PJ is freaking amazing that I can tell when my patients come in with their partners who's going to last long and not. And it's the ones who are really asking questions and wanting to learn about sickle cell. If somebody is making you feel guilty about your condition or putting you down or not believing you, that's a red flag. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't change. You need to have effective communication. But when you have somebody who's really vesting their time without being provoked, that's totally a good sign. Now, Vicky, I know a little bit more about your past, so I want to kind of let you chime in and let us hear how sickle cell has impacted your relationships.
Yeah, I can resonate with Devon, for sure. Definitely surrounding yourself with people who understand, but who also want to understand, right? Because for me, like growing up, I needed extra care. And so that extra care caused a lot of tension with my siblings. And sadly, we're not very close now. And I'm sure I'm not alone on this. So like many of us, I've had to find my way through family dynamics that are far from perfect and, oftentimes quite difficult. And I know that there's still love there, even in the dysfunction, but it's pushed me to find support elsewhere. And over time, it pretty much has helped me learn the value of chosen family, and that means just like surrounding myself with individuals who uplift me, who truly understand, who want to understand sickle cell, and who show up for me. There's like no excuses. So
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I want to let Doris chime in because for those who don't know, Doris is initially from New York and she moved down to sunny state of Florida this year. And I want her to kind of share how you've been able to build and maintain strong connections, even when you're not feeling well or can't physically show up, because I'm very impressed with how well you have integrated in the sickle cell community in South Florida in a really short time period.
Yes. So I think that my hunger for just building a community here in Florida was what kind of pushed me to just, I remember when I got here specifically to Coral Springs, I just Googled nearest sickle cell clinic near me, nearest sickle cell foundation near me. I got in my car, I made a list, and I started knocking on doors. And I remember the first three were closed because obviously, they're not going to be open Monday through Friday. I know at least not smaller ones. And I remember then walking into this one clinic and just feeling at home and just, oh my God, like my people are here. And just kind of tapping into that. I think that I got a lot of messages through social media asking me, how do you meet people? How do I meet our people, our community? And I said, just honestly, well, I can invite you to some if you're in my area, or I can, if you're in New York, I know a couple of foundations that have events, on a monthly basis. I'll try to connect, be like the connecting person for them. But I think just being willing to be vulnerable with people that are the same as you. And that is one thing that till this day, I'm so appreciative of you, Maya, because of that Thrive event, because I met so many wonderful, like just women in general, men too, but just women that were going through, all of these ladies I saw there, and I think there was so many tears and laughing, and it was just awesome. So my one advice for someone that would like to just build or get close into our community would be to just reach out. If you're on Instagram and you see a warrior talking about, their struggles or this, DM them. Hey, oh my God, what you were talking about or your post resonated with me. I love your energy. I've done that all the time. Like, hey, oh my God, I just love your energy. I need you in my life. And just start from there. I think it's just that what is it called? The icebreaker. Just go for it. You'd be surprised how many people are going through the same exact thing. And you can not trauma bond, but find solutions together. Maybe go grounding or, find a yoga class to go to or, invite you to the next Thrive event, which I'm excited for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just all about reaching out.
It's so true. And the sickle cell is such a small, close-knit community that people will respond positively. Just don't do that knee-jerk fear, fight, flight, anger response. But if you're kind and truly showing an interest, a lot of times it'll be well received.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I chime in real quick?
Of course. Maya? Yeah.
So I just want to just say to Doris that is so true. And one of the comments, hard to find those safe spaces and community that Drizzy had mentioned. I would just say reaching out to the community. I personally, I went to the Thrive event that Maya had in November. Going to those events, you network and connect with other warriors, and I found a little small community. Now we're like creating events. It's called Sickle Socials, with another warrior, and we had two outings. One in February, I think it was. We went out to eat at Mexican food. And then the second outing was to see Lilo and Stitch to the movie theater. So, it's so nice to hang out with other warriors and connect in that way and not really focusing on the pain, but just having a little bit of fun. So definitely coming to events, connecting with other warriors. I would recommend that.
I love
Oh,
that.
we just happened to miss our invite, Vicky.
We're gonna expand the text message chain. This was great. But
Yes.
yes, but there's such a good community, and
I'll invite you, Doris. I'll send the
Yes.
invites.
that expands. All right, now I want everyone, I'm going to go around. We have 12 minutes left, and we got a few more questions, and I want to give enough time for the audience to ask as well. So one piece of advice, we'll do rapid fire, would you give someone who feels isolated and wants to build a stronger support? So we've kind of discussed it, but if anybody has any additional advice to chime in to help with those feelings of isolation, feel free to chime in.
I guess just to be honest, to share and educate those who you consider to be in your inner circle. I think the last thing we need as warriors is another reason to be constantly misunderstood.
Yeah.
I think so when you find someone you think is truly listening and hears you and sees you and the complex nature of how you experience this life, I think you have to share your most authentic selves with them. I think being authentic allows the right person to be able to support you completely.
And
I know that's
authenticity is the highest
hard. I,
vibration.
yeah,
Sorry.
I know. I know sometimes we probably feel like we don't want to sound like a broken record or like we're
Yeah.
always complaining, but I just don't think you can be capable of receiving true support if you aren't being true to yourself. And this is a learning task for me because
Yeah.
I'm so quick to deny what I'm feeling and quick to say, yeah, I'm good, when I'm actually the furthest thing from it. So I guess it would be honesty. It's my input.
Somebody had commented here that they're overcome with emotion since Noah, they don't know any other warriors where they live. They have sickle cell trait and experience crises. And I think that's another bucket of patients that it's extremely isolating. We already know like individuals with hemoglobin SC or sickle beta thalassemia plus having higher hemoglobins and not the typical labs we would see, their pain often gets doubted. Sickle cell trait, there are a group of individuals who do experience sickle cell-like complications and pain, and it's even more of a fight to allow providers to believe that something is going on. So I'm glad that you're in this space. Even though we're all in Florida, we're trying to expand our reach through these webinars and other outlets, and feel free to reach out and we can try to connect you with a local advocacy group for you as well. Now, for the last bit, I really want to allow us to just find the joy beyond the trauma. So I'm going to go around and let everybody answer, but I'm going to do a multi-question and you guys answer how you want, but I would love everybody to kind of share a moment of joy or pride or an accomplishment that reminded you that you're more than your diagnosis, and even maybe just share things that bring you joy or lights you up on your hard days, and kind of how you protect your joy and peace while just advocating for yourself and living with sickle cell among so many other things. I'll start with you, Vicky, and we'll go around and then we'll be able to open it up.
Well, my most recent proud moment is getting hired as a case manager, care coordinator at UM, because it means a lot to me to be able to support other warriors and that I'm also someone who can make an impact, even if it is a small one. And to your second question, just how do I protect that joy? Just being more aware of my boundaries, saying no and making sure I take care of myself because honestly, I can't take care of others if I don't take care of myself first. And so that's something I just keep in my head to remember, got to take care of myself. Self-care, 100%.
Definitely. Even without sickle cell, I always say self-care, most important thing. Devin, what about you?
So I think if I had to pick one moment, it'd be when I delivered my son and he was strong and healthy. I had assumed for so many years that my body wasn't going to be capable of achieving a successful childbirth, and so many people amongst family and friends even questioned my decision to do it. So entering motherhood would definitely be a great moment in my life where I felt all those things, joy, pride, and felt accomplished. And what continues to bring me joy, music, travel, good food, books, Disney are my go-tos for finding instant joy. And then remembering to celebrate the small victories, I guess. Like yesterday at the clinic for me, it was being grateful that it only took 3 sticks because last month it took 5 to find a line. So I've started to remember to kind of applaud myself and not undermine the strength it takes to live with this chronic illness day in and day out.
And Devin is someone who has a lot of pain, and you actually had the most uneventful pregnancy, which was amazing. That, like, when we talk about pregnancy and just sickle cell in general, it's so unique to everybody. Some people might experience more crisis with pain, sometimes less. And Devin was one where pregnancy was like great to
It
you.
was the healthiest 9 months of my
It
life to
was
date.
wild. I was very
Yeah, it was
happy.
crazy.
Doris, what about you? Can you share a moment that just brought that joy or pride and made you feel more than your diagnosis? And kind of what do you do to keep that joy even on the hardest days?
Okay, so first I'll try not to cry. I'm gonna piggyback off of Devin just because it has to do with giving birth to my first daughter. But before then, I think it was just every every fifth birthday, right? I mean, I know we've all been told from a very young age, oh, you're not gonna make it till 5 or to 10 to 15, blah blah blah. So I think that every time from my earliest memory, from my 10th birthday, I had heard so much from like doctors and even over here, my family, like, oh, she's not going to make it till 10. And I just remember getting to that birthday and I remember sitting there with the cake and like, oh my God, I'm alive. Like, and I think to then fast forward to being pregnant with my first child, being told so much by my providers at the time that, I wasn't going to make it through the pregnancy, or my child wasn't going to make it through the pregnancy, or we were both not going to make it, or I was going to, not make it during the delivery. So I think that, and it was such a scare that even my family, for my first pregnancy, not many of them even rubbed my belly. Not because they didn't want to, but just because they were so scared. They had been so, like, just whatever. So I think for me, the most joyful moment that I said, wow, like I can't believe that I have sickle cell disease and I just gave birth and I'm still here and I'm alive and my child is healthy. Like for me, that was a moment, by the way, it gave me a crisis because I was so excited.
I shouldn't laugh about it, but it shows it's not just negative emotions.
No,
Positive
it
can
was
trigger
just
sickle cell crisis too.
and I remember being in that pain, not just the giving birth, but just the pain of, just over, when we get too happy or too sad. But just being so excited, like, wow, I created life. Like I didn't think as a sickle cell, patient that I would be able to do this. And I made it. And then round 2, let's go, baby. I got this.
Love that.
But that's it.
amazing.
No more. That's it.
Oh, 2 is a great number. And Megan, we'll end it with you. I would love to hear just a moment of joy or pride. And what do you do to just keep that joy even on the hardest days?
Yeah, I think something that I'm proud of is just being able to do what I love as a clinical social worker, and recently, finding ways to use that to connect to my sickle cell community, such as opportunities like this. That brings me immense joy. And I think that one way that I keep grounded, similar to Devan, I like traveling, eating out, just things like that make me feel connected to who I am. So
awesome. Well, this has been such a robust dialogue and panel discussion. I really appreciate having the 5 of you. I would like to end the last few minutes, and if anybody wants to include one word of how do you feel now at the end of this presentation, I'm curious if we'll have you might still feel sluggish, but maybe we have a little bit more optimistic and positive words. And at this time, I would love to invite anybody to come off camera if they have any questions they'd like to ask, or if you want to put any questions in the chat box. We have a few more minutes to take some of those now.
I have a question.
Impactful and inspired. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I have a question mainly for those of you who pursued higher education. How did you kind of have that balance and manage your health in the midst of trying to do school? And I know for those in social work, trying to pursue those practicum hours, like how did you manage that, especially in the midst of life and flare-ups and pain? Yes.
I can answer that. It took a lot of trial and error. My undergraduate year, I had a crisis every single month throughout my undergraduate career. It was not easy. But I think having positive supports around me and just kind of that, I think a lot of warriors are just, it's instilled, like we're resilient, we bounce back. And so, I think that my larger goals, but I really had to, find my triggers and find what correlated. I found that stress, so I really had to kind of hone in on those things and find opportunities to, lessen stress, being more proactive about my health and care, finding opportunities to practice mindfulness and grounding. That's when I really got into a lot of that, because I found that I had better outcomes, when I was in school and trying to juggle those responsibilities, when I was being more mindful about my self-care and my mental health.
I'll piggyback on everything Megan said, and also that I used disability services from which most universities have, to help me, like even if it was like a professor that I was trying to hunt down because I needed to make up an exam, like they would be that facilitator in between, and that really helped me on that journey in higher education.
And that's a matter of speaking to your provider. You would go to the disability office at your university and ask for an accommodations form, which then gets sent to us as your providers. And I am always so happy to fill out accommodation requests, whether for school, for work, FMLA, because we want to encourage our warriors to be able to accomplish what your dreams are. And you have a little bit more to take into account and some limitations from just preventing the stress from an overexertion from triggering crises. So we are very happy to do that and support you through. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining our first webinar. This will be recorded and we will have it up on YouTube and on our website for anybody who wants to chime in later. I have everybody's email addresses, so we'll see how my day goes, but I will be emailing everybody some resources that you can begin just from a mindfulness standpoint, mental health, and just make you realize how accessible a lot of these tools are. So thank you again so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful end of their week. Again, anybody in Florida, South Florida, we have a World Sickle Cell Day event tomorrow from 1 to 5. And I recommend joining my monthly newsletter. Just go on our website. We do a lot of mental health, holistic wellness tips and tricks. I do a little introduction into astrology if anybody's into that or doesn't know where to start. So with that, thank you so much to my lovely panelists. I really appreciate having you on here. I think at the end of the day, everything or most of what I've learned from a sickle cell standpoint have been from you and from my patients and your lived experiences. So continue to share, continue to be vulnerable and authentic. Don't dim your light for anybody, and 100% protect your energy. So with that, have a wonderful weekend. Happy Friday. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Happy Friday.